We are very honored to have Ami Ayalon with us today. Retired Admiral Ayalon is a former head of the Shin Bet, Israel's Secret Service. He was a commander-in-chief of the Israeli Navy, and he was a government minister and a member of Knesset. He is also recipient of Israel's highest decoration, the Medal of Valor. Nowadays, he is a senior fellow at the Israel Democracy Institute and a member of Commanders for Israel's Security. Recently, Ami Ayalon told his story in a new book called Friendly Fire: How Israel Became Its Own Worst Enemy and the Hope for Its Future. We are also very honored to have as our guest host today, Jim Torchiner. He is a professor of social work and the founder of the McGill Middle East Program in Civil Society and Peace Building, which was renamed ICANN McGill. Professor Torchiner has been directly involved in social work, human rights education, and the development of social movements for well over half a century. His most recent book is Rights-Based Community Practice and Academic Activism in a Turbulent World: Putting Theory into Practice in Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. As always, we welcome audience questions, which I will pose for you during the second half of the hour. Please type in your questions in the using the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar, which we will find at the bottom of your screen. And please don't use the chat for questions because I won't be monitoring the chat as closely. And now, Professor Torchiner, over to you.
Thank you, Gabriela, and thank you for organizing this event. Ami, welcome, bienvenue, bruchim habayim, ahlan v'sahlan. Why do I welcome you in 4 languages? Because as I read your book, I became familiar with 4 different Amis: the soldier, the defender of the state of Israel was one, the peace builder with my friend Sari Nusebi, the person who entered formal politics to try and bring about decisive change, and now an author. And I hope we'll get to hear all 4 aspects of Ami in the half hour we have together. So let me get started. You started as a soldier, you've become a peacemaker. How did that happen?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for the question. In a way, it's probably the question that I'm asking myself almost every morning. I start my book with a quote from Amos Oz. And it is what Amos Oz is saying, that the only journey that you don't come back empty-handed is a journey inside yourself. So in a way, when I finished the book, it took me about 4 or 5 years. I wrote it with a friend of mine. I'm not a writer. I have my ideas, my views, my dreams, but I needed someone who know how to translate it into a book, and a book for foreigners, English readers. So it was a kind of a journey inside myself. And in a way, I was trying to answer the questions that you just asked. I was born in the Jordan Valley. My parents came during the 30s. My father is illegal immigrant. My mother, a child to study in Jerusalem. The dream was to build a state for the Jewish people, which during the 30s they used to believe that is facing a great danger. and they left their families there, and they created a state that was based on two foundations: security and settlements. I never asked my father what is the concept of Zionism that he believed in, but I believe that they used to believe that we are going to build a state for Jewish people in Israel, which is our land. It was given to us. And this future state will be built wherever we can build a settlement, work the land, and defend ourselves. This concept of Zionism brought me to the Navy, and the idea was to come back to the kibbutz after 3-4 years, but I found myself retiring as Admiral of the Navy after more than 33 years of service, because suddenly, after the 6-day war, we felt that the whole security of our state is on our very narrow shoulders. And in a way, I think that the first time when I started to understand that something is wrong with this concept of Zionism that enabled us to build a Jewish state, to build Israel, was during the first Intifada. I didn't listen to Amos Oz. I didn't listen to all these philosophers who told us from the very beginning that it will change us, the occupation. It took me, I used to believe that we are liberators. We liberated these places. It is very, very difficult, as a child to study on Hebron and our parents and Marat HaMachpelah, and Jerusalem and Beit El, and not to believe that this is our places where we come from. And only after 20 years, in a very specific event that I describe, I'm not going to describe it now, but it is in the book, I just met a youngster, a Palestinian youngster. I was deputy commander of the Navy. I had to cross a refugee camp in order to meet the fishermen, Palestinian fishermen, to dictate, to tell them when they can and when they cannot fish. For me, it was natural. This is what I have to do. The fact that I'm controlling, and this was the moment when I was attacked by youngsters. Stones, rocks, I was just me and my driver. I couldn't shoot because they were not armed, they just stones. But then I realized that in the places that we liberated, millions of people are living and they don't see us as liberators. For them, we are a cruel occupier. We control everything, we humiliate them. And in a way, I came to believe that we have to separate this piece of land. When I was the director of the Shin Bet, but this is another story. So it was it took me many years. It was not one day. And only in retrospect, I'm giving myself answers when exactly I started to see a different reality.
Well, and so it is. Life unfolds and we evolve. At one point you mentioned that you were head of the Shin Bet and you were in charge of putting down the Intifada and the war on terrorism.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that? What can we learn from you that you've learned from that?
Well, I have to, first of all, to those people who are watching us and don't know me, I have to put it up front. I do not represent the Israeli government. And in a way, I'm in a minority among my people. And I used to say, people ask me, how come do you think so differently? I said, I'm not wiser. I did not spend, too many years in the academia, but I had the very unique opportunity to see our reality, the Israeli society, our relations with Palestinians, relations between ourselves from a very, very unique and specific angle, which is the director of the Shin Bet. I became the director of the Shin Bet only as a result of the assassination of our Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Exactly 1 year earlier, he asked me to stay. I used to meet him because I was the commander of the Navy. He was the defense minister, the prime minister. I used to meet him every week to present operations and plans. And he asked me to stay, and he asked me to be the director of the Shin Bet because he wanted to introduce change in the Shin Bet, especially with our relations with the Palestinians. And I refused. And in a way, I didn't know exactly why, but I think that it was, I used to see the reality in a very simplistic way. I used to say, well, all what we do, we are not proud of it, but we kill the bad people in order to defend the good people. You know, it's the reality is painted in very, very black and white. There is no gray. There are good and bad. After his assassination, he was assassinated not by a Palestinian terrorist. He was assassinated by an Israeli who served in the IDF, was sitting in the same faculty in Ayalon University, which I finished my first and second degree. Sometime when I was, I asked myself whether he's sitting on the same chair that I was sitting when I studied law in Ayalon University, because he studied law. And he assassinated our prime minister. So suddenly I said, well, we don't know who is good, who is bad, all the colors, who is the enemy. And if people ask, if you ask me, what did I learn? What are the lessons? When it comes to the Palestinians, I learned 2 lessons. First of all, it was the first time when I understood that Palestinians are not only targets, they are human beings. Now, for you in Canada, it is obvious. Everybody is a human being. For us in the military, again, I'm not proud of it. But for us, our enemies are target. You send us in order to kill them, not to negotiate. You send your politicians, your diplomats to negotiate. You send us in order to kill the enemy. So for us, they are targets. Again, I'm not proud of it, but I killed many people. I killed many of our enemies. I never knew anything about them, not their names, children, wife, grandchildren, with whom they pray. When you come to the Shin Bet, in order to fight terror, you have to know everything on every terror activist. Otherwise, you cannot interrogate him. You cannot recruit him as an agent. You cannot understand his motives. Once you know all his names, by the way, Muslims have 4 names. You have to know the second names because it gives you something about his background. You have to know to which school he's sending his children, because it means something whether he's sending his children to Hamas schools, Islamic Jihad school, or a Fatah school. Tells you something about himself. Once you know so much about him, he's becoming a human being. Even if you know that the moment that he will be released, he will go on killing our people. You don't hate him. You understand why he's doing it. You don't sympathize with him, but you empathize. You see him as a human being. And this is something that most Israelis did not see and most Israelis do not understand. The second lesson, by the way, I became friends with people that spent years in our jail because we cooperated fighting terror together. I consider Jibril a Jew. He was a terrorist during the first Intifada, and he became my friend. I visited his family, he visited my family. So he's a human being. The second lesson is the security equation of Israel is very simple. We shall have security, when Palestinians will have hope. Now, for Israelis, it's very, we used to think on war in terms of military decision. To the war against the Palestinian terror, there will be no military decision in the battlefield. Because all the dictionary is different. You cannot deter a person or a group of people if they feel that they have nothing to lose. Now, in order to explain the suicide phenomena, suicide attack phenomena, you have to understand that you meet a person who feels that he has nothing to lose. So hope for him is something that we can take from him, even from a military security reason. We should make sure that he will have hope. Otherwise, we shall never, never come to an agreement. And, you know, Israelis tells me, okay, but they are fanatic, you know, and they created the whole phenomenon of suicide attack. I said, no. The first suicide attack in written history is written in the Bible. This is what happened to Samson. When he committed suicide, if you read this story in the Bible, you understand that it is not ideology. He was humiliated. He felt that he has no escape. And the only way for him is to die with dignity. So it is a human behavior. It is a human phenomenon. So again, the equation that we have to create hope in order for us to have security, to reduce the level of animosity, hatred, and terror. This is the second lesson that I'm trying to convince my friend in Israel to understand, which is very difficult, by the way.
And with that realization, you got together with Sari Nusseibeh,
Exactly.
a well-known scholar, and you said, it is possible. Here is the prodigy of a Jerusalemite family that's been there for maybe 1,000 years. And here is
more since the seventh century.
Yes, and holds the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Right.
And here's a Ben Kibbutz, a Chayal, someone to defend his country. Yeah. Two people from opposite poles with significant voice come together to say there is a different message. Could you tell those who might not be familiar, who haven't had a chance to read your book, what that message is?
Well, first of all, I'll do it, but you have to keep in mind that the whole idea is to sell the book. So
okay,
I'm going.
Right.
I'm not
put it up.
All right. Okay. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but yes, it was several months after I left the Shin Bet. I was not in any official position, and the Intifada broke out, and for me it was not a surprise. It was written on all the walls, in Hebrew, in Arabic, in English. We just refused to read it. It was in all our analysis as in the Shin Bet. But again, cabinet ministers and by the way, American delegations did not accept our view. By the way, Dennis Ross is writing about it in his book, that he did not listen to us in the Shin Bet. Anyhow, it was several months after the Intifada broke out, and you know, hundreds of people were dying on both sides of the no border, and we met in London by the invitation of Professor Mary Kaldor, who became a friend from the London School of Economics, to discuss what can we do in order to, I don't know, to stop the violence. A naive concept, but anyhow, we met, and it's a long story. It is written in my book. But in the end of the meeting, after 3 days, we did not achieve any agreement. But I asked openly, I asked, look, I have in mind 6 parameters. I did not invent anything. I just tried to summarize all what agreed upon during 6 years of negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians with American negotiators. And two states for 2 people, borders along the 67, exchange of territories, Jerusalem, Jewish neighborhoods, Arab neighborhoods, etc. More or less Clinton ideas, but shorter, much shorter. And I asked, okay, who can join me and to sign on a piece of paper? And no one was there, and only Sari was said, well, it makes sense. You know, Sari is a philosopher. He became a great friend, by the way. I'm going to meet him on Friday because in his house in Jerusalem, it's great coffee and great atmosphere. And I owe him some olive oil from, we have fresh olive oil anyhow. So, and we came back to Israel and, you know, we met several times. It was very easy because everything was obvious. You know, what we found was horrible and almost a tragedy. We understood that we Jews hate Palestinians and Palestinians hate Jews. We are afraid of them, they are afraid of us. But when it comes, if you ask a very strange question, forget about everything. You want 2 states in order to keep your Jewish democratic identity. They want Palestinian state because, etc. They want to preserve their identity. What will be the parameters? And we found that majority, between 70 to 80% are very close. We are saying, we deal with the same parameters. Mm-hmm. The problem is that people do not believe, you know, there are 2 narratives. We do not believe that the Palestinians agree on the same parameters and they do not. So the idea was very simple. Let's go out and let's get signatures on Palestinians and Israelis who are signing on 1 piece of paper with 6 parameters that will be written identically in Arabic, English, and Hebrew. We got more than 450,000 signatures. And it was a wave, you know, and on the same time, we were killing each other. It was during the second Intifada. And I found another, you know, it's the second, which is amazing. During the Intifada, when buses were exploded, people were ready, much more than ever, to sign on these parameters. Because in a way, and probably you, professor, can explain it much better than I do. This is psychology. I used to say that belongs to my wife.
I know, that's what
people were ready to sign on everything. They were ready to sell their parents if you just promise them that this horrible violence will come to an end. If you give them a piece of hope, if you show them the way. And that's it. Well, when Arik Sharon decided to pull out of Gaza, and I know because I met him several times, and I know that not only us, of course, it was American pressure and the roadmap and Geneva, but we were, you know, especially because we brought the director of the Shin Bet and commanders, and Sharon said to his people, look, when these military commanders and director of the Shin Bet, we are losing the backbone of the Israeli society, and we know that we influenced on Sharon together with many others. And we really believed that this is a beginning of a new Middle East. If Sharon did it, if Sharon But of course, you know, life is full of surprises. Sharon got ill, and the rest is history.
Well, the rest is history, but the balance of history is still to be written.
Right.
And after Sharon came Omar, who looked
Right.
good until he got into trouble.
Again, right.
But this is the next question, and that is, you're writing this book because you remain an optimist.
Right.
Given everything that you described,
Right.
what gives you hope for the future? And before you answer that one, let me add to that. Do you have a message for people in the diaspora?
Right. Well, I'm very optimistic, not because I know something that you don't know, and I can promise you that tomorrow something great will happen. I'm very realistic. My optimism comes from the very simple, almost simplistic idea that we can not even shape, we can influence on our future. By the way, we can influence on our future more than ever. Look, I was born during the end of the Second World War, and my parents were very optimistic because they decided that they are going to control their future. They were a very small minority within the Jewish people, by the way. When my father, when he was 13 years old, he told his father, look, I quit Judaism and I become a Zionist. They did not speak for 6 months. But he came to Israel and he was very optimistic. In spite of all what happened around him, the idea that, and today Israel, look, we are a regional power in every parameter, in science, in education, in economy, in every parameter. I know that once I'm saying, and this is what we proved, we show, if we can create a political horizon, we can almost dictate and shape the future of our relations with the Palestinians. But we have to accept the idea, and this is why my last meeting, and this is a secret for those who did not read the book, my last meetings are with two philosophers, with Sari and with Professor Chaim Gans. And in a way, Chaim gave a theoretical framework to the way I understand my history. And I know once I say people behave to the way they understand the future. And I quote, by the way, I think in the last chapter, George Orwell, he said during the 30s, something very, very clever. He said, the one who controls the past controls the future, but the one who controls the present controls the past, because we are writing our past. But anyhow, it's not complicated as it seems, but in a way, yes, we control our future because we are very powerful and we can shape. We have to reshape our narrative, and we have to understand the simple idea. This land is ours, but this is not only ours. And if we want to see Israel safe and a Jewish democracy, we have to divide this piece of land, not because we owe something to the Palestinians, because this is our way to maintain our identity. And the last sentence, what do I ask from people who are living outside Israel? I say to you today, and I really hope that I do not offend any of you, because this is not my intention. Zionism was not invented in Israel. Yes, Israel was the core building a Jewish statehood, but it was invented in Europe during the 19th century. It is not for us Israelis to bring Zionism to its end. And I'm telling you, you do whatever you want. If we in Israel, we shall not change our policy, if we shall not change our narrative, we are bringing Zionism to its end, because if we shall go on fighting this war, we are not fighting today Palestinian terror. We are fighting the Palestinian people. We are fighting the Palestinian people in order to deny their right to self-determination and to create a state alongside Israel. This is the war to which we are sending our youngsters. If we shall win this war, and our border will be somewhere around the Jordan, we are not majority in our state. And if we are not majority, we do not have the power and we do not have the right to dictate anything in the public space. Not the calendar, not the language, not the culture, and not the narrative that we are telling our children what happened in the Middle East during the last 5,000 years, 3,000 years, or 100 years. This will be the end of Zionism. And you can see it clearer because you see us from another planet. We are too close to the event. We feel the pain. We hate. Sometimes we are just looking for revenge. We do not see our war in irrational terms. And you care about Israel. We cannot blame you for being anti-Semitic. You cannot blame you for being our enemies. So it is for you to tell us the truth. Every time when I visit America or Europe, people are telling me, we don't have the right to tell you what to do. No, you have. You have the right and you have the responsibility, because Zionism is not only ours. In order to allow you to bring your children to celebrate bar mitzvah or whatever, Israel is important for you. It is for you to tell us exactly what you see, even if we do not want to listen.
Powerful message, and an important one to think about, and a brave one.
Thank you very much.
It reminds me, you talk about Chaim Gantz as your philosophical mentor. One of mine was Peter Maris, and he wrote, the continuity of past and present must be preserved. And to revise the principles by which we have interpreted the past is a far more arduous and impenetrable task than to make what happens now to conform to them.
Right.
Getting societies, people to re-look their own narrative and to be courageous enough to understand the necessity of re-examining it is a work that you have dedicated yourself to. And I think it's a remarkable story how your story began and where you are now. I just finished reading this book and I highly recommend it.
By the way, this young person who is standing there is me, but many, many, many years ago. So, okay.
Well, you didn't have much more hair at that point.
With a hat, yes.
Same here.
Okay.
Gabriella, do we have more time to continue the conversation, or is it your turn?
Well, we have quite a few questions. Why don't we get some audience questions, and then maybe we'll let you ask a final question if you wish, and do it that way. Just a quick, I'm assuming, Ami, that we can get the book through Amazon.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. Friendly Fire. Amazon. You can get it in Kindle or hard copy. Amazon. It's yes.
Okay.
By the way, okay, yeah. In Canada, it's the same cover, like in the States. In England, it was published just a week ago. It's a different picture, but it's the same book.
Okay, great. Well, I have so we'll start some questions. There's quite a few questions already, very good questions. I've got one from Shelley Corin, and she says and there's another one that's similar. So she's saying that Israelis, seems to me that Israelis have become more and more brutalized vis-a-vis the Palestinians since the occupation began. Is that your impression? And then another question asks, this is from Jonathan Brookman, saying it seems that Israel is becoming more and more right-wing and less willing to compromise. And so these are sort of similar. What can cause things to change? And then a third question is also similar, and that is, why is the left so weak in Israel? So perhaps you can address that idea.
Okay, Israelis are more aggressive. Yeah, I think that under the title of Israelis are more aggressive when it comes to the Palestinians, and Israel are the Israeli society is shifting to the right. It's more or less parallel tendencies, and when it comes to our behavior against or in facing the Palestinians. My explanation is that it is obvious. We are facing, look, in 67, we didn't see, again, I'm not a historian, but this is the way I understand our history and our level of violence. We won the war. Okay, we have been attacked. But these were, the Jordanian army and the Syrian army and the Egyptian army, the states and armies. The people who are living there, they were not enemies. And they did not use violence. So, I remember during the 70s and even the beginning of the 80s, we were sitting in Jericho, in Nablus, eating baklava, drinking coffee. Everything was great. This was a time when I used to say we felt like liberators. We built universities. We felt that we are doing something good. We did not understand the national feelings. And the Palestinian people was creating day by day. If you ask me, what was the day that Palestinians declared themselves as a people? I have no idea, but I know that it was a process. It started somewhere during parallel to the Zionist movement. So, and they started to use violence against what they saw as Israeli occupation. So when we faced violence, every time we had to use more violence in order to secure ourselves. So it was, how do you say, a vicious circle. Every time when a Palestinian reacted with violence against what he believed, and he was right from his point of view, we had to make sure that it will never happen again. So we send more troops and more roadblocks and checkpoints and a major issue, more settlements. By the way, we Israelis we are not able to distinguish between settlements and security. We do not understand, most Israelis believe that the settlements are a security asset. When all of us, 95% of the military commanders, Air Force, Army, Navy, Shin Bet, Mossad, all of us are saying settlements became the origin of Palestinian violence. Settlements are not a security asset. It is a liability when it comes to security. The people in the street do not understand it. This is something which, and I believe again that we are going back to our narratives. I'm trying to explain it in my book. It is something that if we feel that this is ours, so all what we are doing is right. We are building our houses. We are building settlements on land which is ours. So the idea of, look, it is not only ours. It's something very, very deep that we should change in our narrative. Anyhow, so yes, in order to achieve security, we have to use more and more power every day and to be more and more violent when we face Palestinians every day. And this will be the tendency. And this is why I'm saying that as long as we shall not achieve agreement with the Palestinians, no matter how many peace agreements we shall have with all our neighbors, unless we shall achieve agreement, some agreement with the Palestinians that gives hope not only to us, but to them, we shall see more and more violence every day. And why the Israeli left is weak or weaker every day? Because the Israeli right is stronger every day. It's in my explanation. A fearful society is looking for power and is looking for a powerful leader, not for a leader, not for philosophers and not for better educators. They are, if a society in a state of fear will elect a leader who knows how to kill the enemy. This is what we saw in Israel every election. No matter whether he knows, if he convinces us, in this case, that all the world is against us, and he is the only one who can save us. So it's something very deep, again, this is psychology, but this is the way I understand the Israeli society. So this is the paradox, is that the only way to change this tendency is to show a political horizon, to explain that it is achievable. By the way, even today, majority of Israelis and majority of Palestinians prefer two-state solution. But once we or them, they do not believe that it is achievable, that we shall see it in our lifetime, they will be against it. This is what we learn from the polls.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
By the way, again, why it is said, because, when we shall change this tendency, when we shall face terror and violence. We don't see it today. Israel, if you come to Israel, people feel secure. Buses are not exploding in our streets. there is no terror within Israel. In America, probably it is, more people are dying as a violence in the street than in Israel. So, and economy, so the reality, the daily reality in Israel. But again, this is what I learned 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had a relatively minor level of terror by youngsters in Jerusalem area. During these 9 months, in 3 polls, every 3 months, it was the only time since the creation of the state that majority of Jews in polls, between 65 to 70% were ready to give back Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem to whoever, Arab neighborhoods in Jerusalem to whoever will be ready to accept them. Because suddenly it was clear to Jerusalemites that this close mixture, this neighborhood with Palestinians is dangerous. And fear was the reason why they wanted to separate Jewish neighborhoods from Palestinian neighborhoods. And it's sad, because I don't want us to face another intifada or another wave of violence in order for us to understand.
The war on terror created as well another war, and it's been well documented. How was it financed? While it cut services to those who need it most and cut the social safety net, at the same time, it gave a tremendous tax cut to the most wealthy. So the costs of the military wasn't borne by the people who are benefiting from it. It was on the backs of the poor in Israel, in Palestine, and in Jordan.
Everywhere, right.
Thank you both. So we have about 20 questions. I know we won't get to them all, but let's try to get to a few more in our short time. So there was one question about the fact that the major Palestinian demand is for the right of return. And I think, as I understand it, the right of return to Israel proper, to Israel within the Green Line. So what is your view about that? Someone else asked, when you talk about 2 states, are you meaning that the Palestinians who live in Israel itself would be transferred to Palestine? So.
Well, it's I find it difficult, to face this kind of question. The second one, I believe that at least I was born in a democracy. And anyhow, so when it comes to the Palestinian right of return, we do not read the right documents, and those of us who read it, they are reading it. They know how to read, but they don't believe. Palestinians gave up on the right of return. Again, Palestinians gave up on the right of return. What do I mean? I wonder how many of the more than 200 participants of this meeting read the Palestinian Declaration of Independence. I wonder how many of the more than 200 participants read the Arab Peace Initiative, which the Palestinian authorities signed, approved it. Now let me explain what is written in the Arab Peace Initiative, because in a way, This is a major Israeli victory. After so many years, they accept, when I say all the members of the Arab League, and later it was accepted by the whole Muslim world. They accept the concept of two states for two people based on 67 lines. They accept the swap, the exchange of territories, because they understand, which enable us to keep 80%, about 400,000 settlers will not have to be removed. But the major change is when it comes to the Palestinian right of return. Now, in the Arab Peace Initiative, they change UN Resolution 194, which deals with the Palestinian refugees. And they say it is not the right of every refugee, the way it was in 48, to decide whether he wants to go back to his house, or whether he wants to go back to Israel, or whether he wants to be compensated. No. The right is delivered to the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority will represent the Palestinian right of return when it will be negotiated with the state of Israel. Now, why it is so important? Because for them, you know, when they signed on this paper, Palestinians, you know, the extremists, Hamas activists, they destroyed the houses or the offices of Halil Shkaki, my friend, by the way, he's a pollster, finished his PhD in Columbia University, was born, of course, in Gaza, because he showed in polls that less than 10% of the Palestinians wish to return to the state of Israel, which of course it is not achievable because their houses does not exist anymore. I am living, by the way, I am living in a village, in what was a Palestinian village named Igzin. Today we call it Kerem Harar. 3,000 Palestinians were living here. I hosted Palestinians who came from Yerbit, from Jordan, and I gave them fruits and I told them, look, this is my house, and you will be welcome every time when you want to visit. I'll give you cold water, fruits, but keep in mind, this is my house. And they accept it. They accept it not because they love me and not because they joined the Zionist movement. Let me finish this anecdote. When I went with Sino Seba, you know, the mother of Sino Seba was born in a place that today, if you know Israel, is called Nes Ziona. Nes Ziona, which is a beautiful town, was a Muslim Palestinian village until 48. And the mother of Sino Seba was born there. Now, when we came with our initiative, one of the parameters is Palestinian refugees will return or shall return only to the state of Palestine, and Jews shall return only to the state of Israel. Now, Sari was giving a lecture in a refugee camp near Nablus, and hundreds of refugees, or families of refugees, were listening. And one of them asked him a question. He wanted them to sign on our initiative. And he said, Sari, did your mother sign on your initiative? So Sari told him, look, I want to be very honest with you. My mother did not sign. But let me tell you what I told my mother. I told my mother, look, Mom, you don't really want to go back to your house. Your house does not exist anymore. What you really want is to go back in time to your childhood, to the old Palestine. Now, let me tell you, Mom, you can't go back in time. You have to face a real dilemma. And you are facing the future of your grandchildren and the decisions that you will have to take, whether to go on dreaming on your past in Nes Ziona, or whether to create a better future for your children. Now he said, my mother is 80 years old. She did not sign. But I ask you to sign because I see that you are younger and your children are younger. Now this son of refugees, he signed. These are the Palestinians. As long as they understand that they will see a better future, they will have a political horizon for their children. They are pragmatic exactly as we are. By the way, everybody who is asking on the dream of the refugees, he did not ask about the dream of the settlers. We have 500,000 settlers that are building every day more settlements. Now, yes, we are facing two conflicting narratives. Palestinians still believe that Greater Palestine is theirs, and we Jews still believe that Greater Israel is ours. Unless we, minority on both sides, will explain that this is achievable, that we can create a better future, meaning to see Israel safe, maintaining our identity as a Jewish democratic state, and it is a parallel for the Palestinians. I know that 85% of the Palestinians will accept it. And yes, between 15 to 70% will fight. But it is exactly as on our side. The man who assassinated our prime minister is a man who believes that there is no political leader who has the right to give this land to anybody. So between 15 to 20% of Jews in Israel and between 15 to 20% of Palestinians, Muslims, they are minority on both sides. It is identical. If we shall not fight our terrorists, our extremists, and if they will not stop their terrorists, yes, we shall go on killing each other for many years.
Thank you very much. Alas, the hour has passed really quickly, and we have come pretty much to the end of it, and I'm very sorry. I don't think we have time for more questions, but maybe I will say a closing remark, and if Professor Torchiner would like to as well. So from my point of perspective, Canadian Friends of Peace Now thanks you very, very much, Ami Ayalon, and also Professor Torchiner for doing this. You've brought a lot of insight and thought-provoking ideas to us. And I'm sure that some of those questions that people have not had answered perhaps are answered in your book. And I really encourage you to look for it. And finally, I just want to say again, if you would like to consider supporting Canadian Friends of Peace Now, do go and visit our website, peacenowcanada.org. And my final words will be all of you to stay safe, stay tuned for more webinars, and happy Hanukkah. And now I will let Professor Torchiner say whatever last remarks he would like to say.
Well, I hadn't really thought about it. other than to thank Canadian Friends of Peace Now for creating these kinds of opportunities. It's really important to hear another narrative, another point of view, and an optimistic point of view that even in these times when people are saying, well, everyone's forgetting about the Palestinians right now, it's Iran, it's this, it's that. I believe what I agree with Ami. The only way that there'll be peace in the Middle East is by getting Palestinians and Israelis. You don't have to love each other. You just got to accept the fact that you're neighbors. And if that's accepted, the future can be determined by the majority of people on both sides who want a two-state solution.
Okay. Thank you again, both of you. And yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available. So good night, Ami. Thank you, Professor Jim, and all the best to our audience.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
תודה רבה לך. וערב טוב.